Before your thoughts rush ahead, allow this quiet moment to settle around your heart, because something has shifted in a place you could never have witnessed on your own. There are moments when the loudest turning points arrive without applause, without celebration, without anyone realizing that an unseen chapter has already begun to close. This is one of those moments. Listen carefully, because every detail matters. What appeared to be an ordinary day slowly unfolded into something no one expected, and the change did not begin with a dramatic announcement. It began with silence, the kind of silence that follows a decision no longer willing to hide behind uncertainty. If you have ever wondered whether distant events can quietly prepare the path for tomorrow's peace, stay with these words. Something important is waiting for you. The story has only begun to reveal itself. Archangel Michael speaks not to create fear, but to remind you that truth often moves with remarkable patience. Your soulmate has been carrying a season that demanded courage far longer than anyone around them understood. On the surface, everything appeared routine, almost predictable. Yet beneath those familiar moments, their heart was learning lessons that could never be hurried. At the divorce hearing, the atmosphere seemed ordinary until one unexpected conversation gently redirected the entire direction of the day. No voices were raised. No dramatic scene unfolded. Instead, one sincere realization quietly entered the room, changing how every remaining step would be taken. Sometimes the greatest surprises arrive not through conflict, but through clarity. Perhaps this sounds distant from your own life, but look closer. Have you noticed how certain delays have protected you from rushing into chapters that were never meant to define you? There are seasons when waiting feels uncomfortable, yet later those very pauses become the reason your future feels steady instead of uncertain. Your soulmate is discovering that same truth. What they believed would end with finality instead became the beginning of honest reflection. Questions they had avoided could no longer remain unanswered, and in those quiet moments, they found themselves thinking about the kind of connection that offers peace instead of pressure. Don't skip this part, because the smallest detail is often the one that changes everything. While others focused only on legal papers and formal conversations, your soulmate's attention drifted somewhere unexpected. They began remembering qualities they once believed were impossible to find. Kindness without conditions, patience without performance, and a presence that feels safe instead of demanding. Those thoughts did not arrive by accident. They appeared like gentle light entering through a window that had been closed for far too long. Yet one moment remains untold. There was a brief exchange before the day came to an end, so quiet that almost everyone overlooked it. But those few words continue echoing inside your soulmate's heart even now, and what they understood from that exchange is preparing to reshape everything that follows. The meaning of those words is where this journey truly begins. The quietest moments often carry the deepest answers, and this is exactly where the story turns in a direction no one expected. Those few unnoticed words refused to leave your soulmate's mind. They were simple, almost ordinary, yet they settled into their heart with surprising weight. Long after the hearing had ended and the conversations faded into memory, they found themselves replaying that brief exchange again and again. It was not because someone had told them what to do. It was because, for the first time in a very long while, they could clearly recognize the difference between merely moving forward and truly finding peace. Archangel Michael gently reminds you that clarity rarely arrives all at once. It unfolds like the first light before sunrise, revealing one small piece at a time. Your soulmate began realizing that the life they were trying to protect no longer reflected the person they were becoming. That realization was not painful, it was freeing. Sometimes the greatest act of courage is simply admitting that your heart has quietly outgrown yesterday's story. Then something unexpected happened. As they gathered their thoughts and prepared to leave, a familiar question rose within them without warning. It was not about the past they were leaving behind. It was about the future they had not yet met. They wondered what it would feel like to share life with someone who offered calm instead of confusion, someone whose presence felt like coming home after a very long journey. They could not explain why that thought appeared so suddenly, but it stayed with them for the rest of the day. Have you ever sensed that certain moments seem strangely connected, even when they happen miles apart? This was one of those moments. While your own path continued in its ordinary rhythm, another chapter was quietly unfolding beyond your view. Every step your soulmate took seemed to pull them closer to a deeper understanding of what truly matters. They were no longer searching for perfection. They were beginning to value sincerity, trust, and the quiet strength that grows through patience. Stay till the end, because another unexpected detail is about to surface. Before leaving, your soulmate paused for just a moment near a window where the afternoon light stretched across the room. There was nothing extraordinary about the scene itself, yet something within them became remarkably still. In that silence, they made a promise known only to their own heart. That if another meaningful connection ever entered their life, they would no longer allow fear or old disappointments to speak louder than hope. But the story does not end there. Later that evening, an unexpected message reached someone connected to the hearing. It contained only a few lines, yet those words revealed something your soulmate had kept hidden from everyone until now. That message has not reached the person it was truly meant to influence. And what it says will change the direction of this journey in ways no one could have anticipated. Evening has a remarkable way of revealing what daylight politely conceals, and as the world around your soulmate grew quieter, the message that had been sent earlier began to carry a meaning far greater than anyone expected. It was not long. It contained no dramatic declarations and no attempt to rewrite the past. Yet every sentence reflected a heart that had finally stopped pretending. Sometimes the strongest words are the ones written after silence has done its work. Archangel Michael reminds you that honesty arrives most powerfully when it no longer seeks approval. Your soulmate was not trying to impress anyone anymore. The need to defend every choice had quietly faded. What remained was something much simpler, a sincere desire to build a future that would never require them to hide their true self again. That quiet shift became more valuable than any argument they could have won. As those thoughts settled, another realization gently surfaced. They began noticing how often they had mistaken familiarity for peace. Just because something had lasted a long time did not mean it was meant to last forever. Some chapters remain open only until the lesson inside them has been understood. And on this evening, they felt as though one of those lessons had finally reached its natural conclusion. Don't skip this moment, because the smallest discovery often changes the direction of the entire journey. While looking through a few personal belongings they had almost forgotten, your soulmate came across a simple note they had written long ago. It wasn't addressed to anyone. It was a quiet reminder to themselves about the kind of relationship they had once dreamed of, a connection built on kindness, laughter, patience, and mutual respect. Reading those forgotten words felt strangely familiar, as though they were meeting an earlier version of themselves who still believed such a future was possible. For several minutes, they simply sat in silence. No distractions. No hurried decisions. Just the gentle realization that hope had never truly disappeared, it had only been waiting beneath layers of disappointment. In that stillness, they found themselves wondering about someone they had never met but somehow felt prepared to recognize. Not by appearance. Not by circumstance. But by the unmistakable feeling of peace that person would bring into the room. Something important is waiting for you, because this next detail connects everything that has happened so far. Before the night came to an end, one unexpected phone call arrived. It was from someone who had quietly observed the entire hearing from the beginning. Their voice carried no judgment, only one thoughtful question that caused your soulmate to pause longer than anyone expected. They did not answer immediately, because the truth rising within them was far more meaningful than the words they were about to speak. And that answer, still unspoken, is where the next chapter quietly begins. Some answers are not spoken the moment a question is asked. They arrive only after the heart has traveled through a silence that words could never cross. That is exactly what happened next. The thoughtful question lingered long after the phone call ended, not because your soulmate lacked an answer, but because they finally understood that the next sentence they spoke would shape the direction of every step ahead. For the first time in years, they refused to answer from habit. They chose to answer from truth. Archangel Michael gently reminds you that wisdom is rarely loud. It often whispers when everything else has become still. Your soulmate sat quietly, allowing memories to pass through their mind like pages turning in a book that had finally reached its closing chapter. They did not focus on what had gone wrong. Instead, they noticed something they had overlooked for far too long: the person they were becoming was no longer the person who had begun that journey. Growth had happened quietly, one unseen day at a time. Then an unexpected feeling settled over them. It was not excitement. It was not sadness. It was relief. The kind of relief that comes when carrying a weight so long that you almost forget what it feels like to stand freely. In that gentle moment, they realized they no longer wanted to build a future around old disappointments. They wanted a future where conversations brought comfort instead of confusion, where trust did not have to be earned every single day, and where kindness was never treated as weakness. Stay till the end, because a quiet detail is about to reveal why this day mattered far more than anyone realized. As they prepared to leave, someone who had remained in the background throughout the hearing stepped forward with a warm smile. There was nothing extraordinary about the greeting, yet one simple sentence stayed with your soulmate: sometimes the hardest ending is simply making room for the right beginning. Those words were offered gently, without expectation, but they echoed with surprising strength. Your soulmate carried that sentence with them through the evening. While walking beneath the fading light, they began imagining a different kind of tomorrow, not one filled with perfect circumstances, but one filled with genuine connection. They wondered what it would feel like to meet someone who appreciated quiet moments as much as joyful ones, someone who valued honesty over appearances, someone whose presence made ordinary days feel meaningful. That thought lingered longer than they expected, and instead of dismissing it, they welcomed it. Don't skip this next moment, because the story is quietly preparing another turn. Later that night, while organizing a few final papers from the hearing, one small envelope slipped unnoticed onto the floor. It had been tucked away among ordinary documents, almost as if it had been waiting for the right time to be found. Your soulmate picked it up with quiet curiosity. The handwriting on the front stopped them completely, not because they recognized every detail, but because it awakened a feeling they could not explain. Before opening it, they paused, took a slow breath, and sensed that whatever was written inside would not speak about the past, it would point toward a future they had only just begun to believe was possible. There are moments when an unopened envelope feels heavier than every conversation that came before it. Your soulmate held it carefully, not because of what it weighed in their hands, but because of what it might awaken in their heart. The room had become completely still. Even the ordinary sounds of the evening seemed to fade into the background, as though time itself had chosen to wait for what would happen next. Archangel Michael gently reminds you that not every revelation arrives to surprise you. Some arrive to confirm what your heart has quietly sensed all along. With a steady breath, your soulmate unfolded the letter inside. It was not filled with dramatic statements or extraordinary promises. Instead, it spoke about something far more powerful, the courage to begin again without allowing yesterday to define tomorrow. Every line seemed to mirror thoughts they had never shared with anyone. It spoke of choosing peace over proving a point. It spoke of leaving behind conversations that no longer brought life and making room for relationships built on honesty, patience, and mutual respect. As they continued reading, they realized this message had reached them at exactly the moment they were finally ready to understand it. Have you ever noticed how certain words seem to find you only after you have grown into them? Months earlier, this letter might have felt ordinary. But now, every sentence carried unexpected meaning. It wasn't changing who your soulmate was, it was revealing the person they had quietly become through every challenge they had faced. Don't skip this moment, because something gentle is unfolding beneath the surface. As they folded the letter and placed it back inside the envelope, a peaceful smile appeared almost without them noticing. It wasn't the smile of someone who had all the answers. It was the smile of someone who no longer feared asking new questions. For the first time in a long while, the future no longer felt like an uncertain road. It felt like an open horizon waiting to be explored. Then another realization quietly entered their heart. They stopped wondering whether the right connection could exist and started wondering how they could become the kind of person who would recognize it when it arrived. That single shift changed everything. Their attention moved away from looking back and gently toward looking ahead, where hope could grow without carrying the weight of old expectations. Stay till the end, because the next quiet detail ties every previous moment together. Before going to sleep, your soulmate reached for a notebook resting beside the bed. Without hesitation, they wrote one sentence across a blank page: "When the time is right, I will welcome what brings peace instead of chasing what brings uncertainty." They closed the notebook, believing no one would ever read those words. But as the morning light began to approach, an unexpected invitation was already making its way toward them, one they had never planned for and could not have predicted. It seemed ordinary on the outside, yet hidden within it was a meeting that would gently connect the lessons of the past with a future that was quietly drawing closer than either of you could yet imagine. Morning arrived without fanfare, yet something within your soulmate felt unmistakably different. The air seemed lighter, not because every question had been answered, but because they had stopped carrying answers that no longer belonged to them. The invitation resting before them looked simple, almost easy to overlook. There were no extraordinary details, no grand promises, only a quiet opportunity that seemed to arrive at precisely the right moment. Archangel Michael gently reminds you that some of life's most meaningful doors never announce themselves with great noise. They appear as ordinary moments, waiting for someone whose heart has become ready to notice them. Your soulmate looked at that invitation longer than expected. It wasn't the event itself that caught their attention, it was the feeling that accepting it would symbolize something much greater than simply showing up. It would be their first step into a chapter no longer shaped by the past. As they reflected, another thought quietly surfaced. They realized that healing had not erased every memory. Instead, it had changed the way those memories spoke to them. The experiences that once felt heavy now carried quiet wisdom. They no longer asked, "Why did this happen to me?" They began asking, "What has this prepared me to become?" That single question opened a window where there had once only been a wall. Don't skip this moment, because the next realization is surprisingly personal. Think about your own journey for a second. How many times have you believed nothing was changing simply because the changes were too gentle to notice? Growth often happens beneath the surface, long before it becomes visible. Just as a seed quietly prepares before anyone sees the first green leaf, meaningful transformation often begins in places no one else can witness. When your soulmate finally accepted the invitation, they felt an unexpected calm. There was no rush, no pressure to force the future into place. Instead, they carried with them a quiet confidence that whatever was truly meant to enter their life would never require them to abandon their peace in order to receive it. That understanding became more valuable than any certainty they had searched for before. Something important is waiting for you. During the gathering, a conversation unfolded that seemed completely ordinary to everyone else. People smiled, exchanged stories, and continued with the evening. Yet in the middle of those simple moments, one unexpected name was mentioned. Your soulmate paused. They had never heard that name before, yet something about it stirred a quiet curiosity they couldn't explain. It wasn't recognition, it was anticipation, the gentle feeling that certain paths begin long before two people ever meet. As the evening drew to a close, they stepped outside and looked up at the fading sky. There was no dramatic sign, no overwhelming revelation, only a peaceful certainty that life was no longer closing doors around them. It was beginning to open them, one careful step at a time. But just as they were about to leave, someone approached with a small photograph that had accidentally slipped from a folder earlier that day. The image itself seemed ordinary. Until your soulmate noticed one remarkable detail hidden in the background. They looked at it twice, then a third time, realizing that this single forgotten photograph connected events that had seemed completely unrelated. And the meaning behind that unexpected connection is only now beginning to reveal itself. Not every discovery announces itself the moment it is found. Some remain hidden in plain sight until the heart is finally ready to understand why they matter. Your soulmate held the photograph once more, studying the small detail that had first seemed insignificant. It wasn't the main subject of the picture that caught their attention. It was something quietly resting in the background, a familiar place, a familiar season, a moment that connected separate chapters into one unfolding story. Archangel Michael gently reminds you that meaningful connections are often woven together long before anyone notices the pattern. Looking back, your soulmate realized there had been quiet intersections throughout their journey, moments that felt ordinary then, yet now seemed to carry unexpected purpose. Nothing had been forced. Nothing had been rushed. Every experience had simply prepared them to recognize what truly deserved their attention. They slipped the photograph into the notebook beside the letter, almost instinctively. It felt as though those two simple items belonged together. One represented the wisdom they had gained. The other hinted at possibilities they had not yet explored. As they closed the notebook, a peaceful thought entered their mind: perhaps the future is not created in one extraordinary day, but in countless ordinary moments that slowly begin to point in the same direction. Stay till the end, because this next realization changes the meaning of everything that came before. Later that evening, someone who had known your soulmate for many years noticed something different about them. It wasn't visible in their appearance. It was visible in their presence. They seemed lighter, more at peace, more willing to listen than to prove themselves. With a warm smile, that person quietly said, "You've changed in the best possible way." Those simple words lingered long after the conversation ended. Your soulmate understood that real transformation doesn't ask for recognition. It naturally becomes visible through the way a person carries themselves. The need to chase what was leaving had disappeared. In its place was a quiet readiness to welcome what was arriving. Don't skip this moment, because something important is waiting for you. Before going to sleep, they opened the notebook one final time. Beneath the sentence they had written the night before, they added another: "When peace becomes my guide, I no longer fear the timing of my future." They paused, smiled gently, and closed the cover without realizing that those words would soon be reflected back to them in the most unexpected way. Then came the final surprise of the day. Early the next morning, a message appeared from someone they had not spoken with in a very long time. It wasn't about the divorce hearing. It wasn't about the past. It simply carried an invitation to a place they had almost forgotten. A place where new conversations, quiet laughter, and an unexpected encounter were already waiting. Your soulmate couldn't have known it then, but the next step would no longer be about closing old chapters. It would be about recognizing someone whose presence felt strangely familiar from the very first hello, and that moment is closer than either of you realizes.